From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
It was a lot of shock. It was completely unexpected. So we're talking about right now actively serving with distinction and honor. We've got 15,000 transgender service member serving across all branches in all different job sets.
In a move that shocked even the Pentagon, President Trump has barred transgender people from serving in the military. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is arguing the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 doesn't protect members of the LGBTQ community. We'll speak to the first openly transgender infantry soldier in the U.S. Army about President Trump's words. And the resistance rolls on. We'll look at how disability activists are staging historic protests in Washington and around the country to fight the Republican effort to strip health care from tens of millions of people. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In a surprise announcement, President Trump tweeted Wednesday he'll ban transgender people from serving in the U.S. military. Trump made the declaration on Twitter, quote, "After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you," Trump tweeted in 3 separate tweets. Trump's decision came despite his pledge at the Republican National Convention last year that he would, quote, "do everything in his power to protect our LGBTQ citizens," unquote. The move set off protests outside the White House and at the military recruitment centers around the country. This is Mara Kiesling of the National Center for Transgender Equality.
Well, it seems that what the president is saying is that he is going to fire 15,000 highly trained, motivated troops. It is a catastrophe for military readiness. It is, of course, a catastrophe for those 15,000 people who are just trying to serve their country. But it is just absurd that he would think to do this and do it apparently without consulting the Pentagon.
Trump's announcement appeared to even shock the Pentagon, which has directed all questions about the order to the White House. Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin said he learned of the policy change from Trump's tweet. It came after Defense Secretary James Mattis said last month he would give generals another 6 months to determine whether to allow transgender troops to enlist. This is a reporter questioning White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders during a news conference Wednesday.
What happens to transgender service members now? Are they immediately thrown out of the military?
That's something that the Department of Defense and the White House will have to work together as implementation takes place and is done so lawfully.
A study by the RAND Corporation estimates gender reassignment treatments would cost the military between $2.5 million and $8.5 million annually, a minuscule fraction of the Pentagon's $600 billion budget. By comparison, the total military spending on erectile dysfunction medicines amounts to 10 times as much annually. We'll have more on Trump's move to ban transgender people from the military after headlines. On Capitol Hill, the Senate Wednesday rejected legislation to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a replacement after 7 Republican senators broke ranks to reject the bill in a 45-55 vote. The latest defeat came a day after Republicans failed in a bid to pass their bill to repeal and replace Obamacare. With just 8 hours left to debate health care, Senate leaders are now considering what's being called a skinny repeal, which would eliminate the individual and employer mandate that requires certain businesses to provide health insurance to employees. It would not touch the Medicaid program. Democrats blasted Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for keeping details of the so-called skinny repeal secret. But on Wednesday night, the Congressional Budget Office offered its assessment of what Democrats said is a likely draft of the bill, finding it would increase the number of uninsured people by at least 16 million while increasing premiums by about 20%. The debate came amidst massive protests on Capitol Capitol Hill and at lawmakers' offices. A recent USA Today poll found just 12% of Americans supported the Senate version of the health care bill. We'll have more on the fight over health care later in the broadcast. Meanwhile, President Trump has nominated former Republican Congressmember Pete Hoekstra as U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands. Hoekstra's co-founder of the House Tea Party caucus. He supports the death penalty, opposes abortion, and has spoken out against marriage equality and LGBTQ rights. In Yemen, the heads of the United Nations relief agencies pleaded Wednesday for a massive increase in humanitarian aid as the number of cases of cholera in Yemen hit 400,000. UN leaders say the outbreak has increased the number of Yemenis in need of assistance to nearly 21 million. This is Peter Maurer, head of the International Committee of the Red Cross.
The overall situation is very dire and very catastrophic with regard to certain areas of that I have mentioned, health situation in particular. If the ICRC within 2 weeks decides to double its program in Yemen, it's an indication that the situation is very bad.
The cholera outbreak comes as more than 2 years of U.S.-backed Saudi-led bombing in Yemen has devastated Yemen's health, water, and sanitation systems. Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that UN investigators blame the U.S.-backed Saudi-led military coalition for a deadly attack on a Somali migrant boat off Yemen in March that killed 42 people and injured 32 others. Reuters cites a confidential UN report that found the attack violated international humanitarian law. It blamed a U.S.-made helicopter gunship operated by Saudi Arabia for the assault. In Iraq, thousands of families from Mosul remain living in camps and unable to return to their homes nearly a month after Iraq's prime minister declared victory in the U.S.-backed offensive to reclaim the city from ISIS. At the Salamiyah camp west of Mosul, residents complain of limited water supplies and sweltering heat. Those returning to Mosul say they face ongoing violence and unlivable conditions.
I can't go back to my neighborhood because there is no water, no electricity, no services, nothing at all in my area. Our homes were destroyed. They were robbed, TVs, everything was stolen. We came here to this camp, and life here is very difficult.
The Independent reports more than 40,000 civilians died in the 9-month battle to retake Mosul, with thousands of bodies still trapped under the rubble. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch is calling on the Trump administration to cut off support to an Iraqi army division after it reported Wednesday Iraqi troops trained by the U.S. allegedly executed several dozen prisoners in Mosul's Old City. The New York Times reports President Trump is being pressured by a billionaire financier and a chemical executive to escalate the U.S. war in Afghanistan in a bid to exploit Afghanistan's mineral wealth. The Times reports Trump discussed Afghanistan's vast deposits of metals and rare earth metals with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and is reportedly considering sending an envoy to Afghanistan to meet with mining officials. A 2010 U.S. estimate found Afghanistan has mineral deposits worth nearly $1 trillion. In France, human rights groups warn police are abusing migrants in the northern city of Calais as they return to the site of a former camp known as the Jungle in the hopes of crossing into Britain. Benedict Ginrod, the director of Human Rights Watch France, says police have routinely confiscated sleeping bags and clothing from migrants while pepper spraying them and confiscating food and water.
Les forces de police utilisent le gaz poivre contre des migrants endormis ou contre des...
Police forces use pepper spray against the migrants who are sleeping, or disrupt food distribution against the food of the migrants, for example. This is a use of force which is unjustified. It is disproportionate and constitutes a violation of human rights and the protections that these people have a right to.
Last November, French police dismantled the Calais refugee camp, scattering thousands of asylum seekers, many of them unaccompanied children seeking to reunite with relatives in Britain. Back in the United States, police in Minneapolis will be required to start recording video on their body cameras whenever they respond to emergency calls or interact with any victim, suspect, or witness under a new policy announced Wednesday by the city's interim police chief.
What good is a camera if it is not being used when it may be needed the most? From this day forward in the Minneapolis Police Department, we want to add strength to our expectations. Body-worn cameras must be on.
The change follows public outcry over the death of 40-year-old resident Justine Ryschik, who was shot in the abdomen by Officer Mohammed Noor on July 15th after she dialed 911 twice to report a possible sexual assault near her home. Neither Officer Noor nor his partner had activated their body cameras at the time of Ryschik's killing. In Austin, Texas, police arrested 15 immigrants' rights activists Wednesday as they blocked an intersection near the state capitol in a peaceful sit-in protest. The activists were calling on lawmakers to repeal SB 4, Texas' harsh new anti-immigrant law. They also called on the Trump administration not to end the DACA program, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which gives some immigrants permission to live, work, and study in the United States. Among those arrested were 4 DACA recipients who chanted, "Undocumented, unafraid." This is Juan Ortiz, an activist from El Paso and one of the 15 arrested.
Time is running out under this leadership, and we need to do whatever we can now, put whatever we can on the line so that we can get people out of the shadows and into the light.
The protest came as firefighters in El Paso, Texas, say they discovered the bodies of 4 migrants, including 2 children, who died attempting to cross the Rio Grande River along the U.S.-Mexico border. The deaths came just 10 days after 10 undocumented immigrants died from heat exposure and asphyxiation after they and dozens of others were crammed into the back of a sweltering tractor-trailer as part of their journey to enter the United States from Mexico. They were found in a truck in a Walmart parking lot in San Antonio. And in New York City, Pedro Hernandez, a Bronx teen who's been held at the notorious Rikers jail while awaiting trial for a 2015 crime he says he did not commit, will be released on bail after the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Group agreed to post $100,000. Hernandez is fighting charges that he fired a shot that injured another teen in 2015, even though the victim and 8 other teens who witnessed the shooting say Hernandez is innocent. Hernandez has been in jail since July of 2016. His plight has drawn comparisons to the case of Khalif Browder, another Bronx teen who committed suicide in 2015 at the age of 22 after being held at Rikers for nearly 3 years without trial for a crime he did not commit. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Wednesday evening, protesters gathered in front of the White House and at the U.S. Armed Forces Recruitment Station in Times Square, New York, to denounce President Trump's surprise announcement banning transgender people from serving in the military. Trump made the declaration on Twitter Wednesday morning, tweeting, "After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you," he tweeted in 3 separate tweets. Trump's announcement reverses Obama-era rules allowing transgender people to serve in the military and have all their health care costs, including gender reassignment surgery, covered. Trump's announcement appeared to have even shocked the Pentagon, which has directed all questions about the order to the White House. The New York Times reports Defense Secretary James Mattis learned of Trump's plans on Tuesday. Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin said he learned of the policy change from Trump's tweet. Politico is reporting Trump may have made the snap decision in an attempt to secure congressional funding to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border. A spending bill, which included money for the wall, was facing possible defeat in the House because some Republicans wanted to ban Pentagon-funded sex reassignment operations. After learning of the dispute, Trump took a much more dramatic stand to completely ban transgender people from serving in the military. But many questions remain unanswered as to what will happen to the estimated 15,000 trans service members currently in the military. This is a reporter questioning White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders during a news conference on Wednesday.
What happens to transgender service members now? Are they immediately thrown out of the military?
That's something that the Department of Defense and the White House will have to work together as implementation takes place and is done so lawfully.
According to the Trans Military Project, some 15,500 transgender individuals currently serve in the U.S. military. Transgender people are twice as likely to serve than cisgender people, and there's no other known organization that employs more transgender people than the U.S. military. Trump's decision to ban transgender service members came on the 69th anniversary of the desegregation of the military. On July 26, 1948, President Truman signed an executive order to integrate the armed forces. Well, for more, we go to Seattle, Washington, where we're joined by Staff Sergeant Patricia King. She was the first infantry member to reveal she's transgender. King has served in the Army for 18 years, including 3 active combat deployments to Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Patricia King, welcome to Democracy Now! Your response to the presidential announcement yesterday that all transgender people will be banned from the military.
Thank you so much for having me. When I woke up yesterday morning, I woke up to the news as my phone blew up from other service members who were concerned about what this meant for them. Do we still have a job? Will we still have a job? Can I continue to serve? And I woke up very much in a state of shock. My first reaction was, did I just get fired via tweet? And from there, I moved on, and I calmed my fellow service members down, and we banded together as we always do. And then I laced up my boots, and just like any other day, I went to work.
And where do you work?
I am a soldier at Fort Lewis, Washington. I serve in the 2-3 Infantry.
So what were people saying on the base?
When I got to work, the truth is that people still didn't know. I was the first person to tell my chain of command what had happened. My leadership was quick to reassure me and say that they supported me, that they have my back, and that we're a team, and that they were in my corner.
So what exactly does this mean? I mean, if he is banning all service members who are trans, are they going to be going to bases all over the world, not to mention bases here like yours, Fort Lewis, and kick you out?
You know, I couldn't speak to what's going to happen next. What I know is that I've been serving for 18 years now. I've served honorably and proudly, and it's my intention to continue to serve, so it's my goal to make it so that I can do that.
Now, the Pentagon has made gender reassignment a covered health benefit, as ordered by the Obama administration. What would it mean to transgender service members to lose this benefit?
Well, I don't think that health care should be considered a benefit, first of all. We have to remember that what the previous Secretary of Defense said was that all medically necessary care will be covered. And it's hard to consider something that's medically necessary a benefit. Most of us who serve, the most important thing to us is the ability to continue serving our country. So while my health care is a concern, my major concern right now is that I've been serving this country for almost 2 decades. I love my country, and I just want to be able to continue to serve.
Can you talk about why you joined the military?
Initially, I joined out of high school, and it was very much a soul-searching opportunity. I came into the military in an effort to figure out who I was and where my place in the world was. What I immediately found out is just how much I love the military. I love the camaraderie and the opportunity to make a difference, and that's what kept me here for 18 years.
A study by the RAND Corporation estimates gender reassignment treatments would cost the military between $2.5 million and $8.5 million annually. By comparison, the total military spending on erectile dysfunction drugs amounts to 10 times as much annually. Your response to this, Staff Sergeant King?
Well, I'm fortunate not to need erectile dysfunction medication.
But what does it say to you about the priorities of the president?
I would be remiss if I decided to speak on the priorities in Washington, D.C. I can tell you that my priority is service to my country and being able to continue to represent this country and the transgender community. I know dozens and dozens of service members who their main concern is focusing on the freedom of our country and continuing to provide that freedom. We're certainly not worried about the political leanings left or right in Washington, D.C.
Last year, candidate Donald Trump tweeted, "Thank you to the LGBT community. I will fight for you while Hillary brings in more people that will threaten your freedoms and beliefs." Your response today?
Again, Washington, D.C. seems like a world away from me. When I get up in the morning, I put on my boots, I lace them up, and I get ready to go to work. My focus is on being a supportive member of my team. And the team that I work with, the brothers and sisters in arms that I work with, are there to support me. They're not concerned about whether I'm transgender or cisgender, whether I'm a man or a woman. In the military, we focus on job performance. And that's the only thing that matters, is how well you can do your job.
This seems to have taken the Pentagon by surprise, this tweeted announcement yesterday that affects the lives of so many thousands of people. James Mattis, the defense secretary, was on vacation. The Times reports he learned of this the day before. But he had announced a month ago that he was doing a 6-month investigation to decide on the status of transgender people in the military. What is your sense of what the leadership feels about this? Has it changed under the Trump administration from the highest levels to, well, where you are on your base?
Well, when the Department of Defense decided that they were going to integrate transgender people into the military, they did the most exhaustive study on a people group that the military has ever done. They commissioned RAND Corporation, the New England Journal of Medicine did their own study, and the Department of Defense did a study for a year. In that time, they also sought out the 18 partner nations that we have who all have open transgender service. This was a detailed study that took a year to complete. And then the Secretary of Defense decided to give a further 6 months just to make sure that we were being thorough. Here in the military, we don't do anything quickly because we want to ensure that we're doing things right. I think the Secretary of Defense has the best interest of all soldiers and service members in mind. I can tell you that at JBLM here at Fort Lewis, there's been no change. Nobody has said that because one person is in charge or another person is in charge at any level that I was less or more of a person. My leadership has supported me, and I'll continue to support them.
So, Staff Sergeant Patricia King, you're the first infantry member to reveal that you're transgender. You've served in the Army for 18 years, including 3 active combat deployments to Afghanistan. Can you tell us your personal story? Did you transition in the military?
Yes, I did. I came out as transgender in January of 2015. After sharing this information with my family and receiving overwhelming support, I decided that it was time to move forward and that I wanted to live an authentic life. So the next people I decided it was important to come out to was my leadership in the military. I sat down with them and I shared that I was transgender and what this meant. At the time, the policy did not support transgender service, but my leadership knew the difference between what is allowed and what is right, and they wanted to support me in any way they could. So they supported me while adhering to policy, and shortly thereafter, transgender integration began to happen, and I was accepted by the military.
Finally, this is, the 69th anniversary of the decision by President Truman to desegregate the military. Your thoughts on the day that this happened 69 years ago, yesterday, the day Donald Trump tweeted that transgender people would be banned from the military was the actual anniversary.
In the military, we believe that we're leaders. We've led this nation in so many things. We've led the nation in the integration of service members from different ethnicities, different religions. We've done gender integration. We've integrated the LGBT community. And last year, we started the greatest gender integration to happen in our military by opening combat jobs to women and breaking down the transgender barrier. We are leaders in the military, and we are people that don't see race, religion, gender identity. The only thing we see is job performance. I know that the military wants to support their soldiers just as we've continued to support our country, and I believe that's what they'll continue to do.
Will you be joining protests against President Trump's, tweet? And it's not clear how this actually goes into effect.
To be honest with you, I have work to do. I'm a soldier, and I have other soldiers that I need to support and stand with, and that's where my place is.
Staff Sergeant Patricia King, I want to thank you for being with us. First infantry member to reveal that she is transgender. King has served in the Army for 18 years, including 3 active combat deployments to Afghanistan. We come back, we'll continue the discussion. Stay with us. True Trans Soul Rebel by Against Me here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. To talk more about President Trump's order to ban transgender people from the military, I want to turn to a clip from a short 2015 New York Times mini-documentary called Transgender, at War and in Love, directed by our next guest, Fiona Dawson.
My name's Logan Beck Ireland. I'm 27 years old, and I'm a senior airman in the United States Air Force, currently stationed in Kandahar, Afghanistan. There's not a lot of people that know that I'm transgender. It's very much on a need-to-know basis. Currently in Afghanistan, there's only a handful, and those people are of higher rank than, of course, the people that I came here with from my home station.
How often do you give yourself a shot?
So it's every Friday. When the other guys ask me what being transgender means, I basically say that it's just being assigned female at birth. Your mind does not come in alignment with your body. After doing it every week for over 3 years, you just kind of get used to it. And that's it. What I like about this deployment is I can be my authentic self. I'm just another guy, whereas back home, I'm still seen as female, and I go by female regs and standards. Here in Afghanistan, a war zone, it's like a vacation to me because I can be myself in such an austere environment. I will need to tell my commander back in Altus that, look, I am transgender. I stand to lose everything. I stand to lose my career, my future, my foundation. It takes away the service that I've done and that I feel very proudly to have accomplished. It takes all that away.
A clip from Transgender at War and in Love, and we're joined now by Fiona Dawson, who directed the short documentary, also the creator of the media project Transmilitary. On Wednesday evening, she attended the protest outside the White House against Trump's announcement to ban transgender service members. Also with us, Dean Spade, longtime trans activist who founded the Sylvia Rivera Law Project in New York. Dean is now a professor at Seattle University School of Law. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Let's begin with Fiona Dawson, your response when you heard and read the tweets of President Trump yesterday, taking, to say the least, many by surprise.
Yes, thank you for having me today, Amy. I was absolutely shocked. We had not anticipated this whatsoever, and I think it's just another example of how this president is just waking up each morning and just shooting off tweets left, right, and centre. But it's incredibly disruptive to our country to be living in this state of affairs.
And Dean Spade, talk about your response yesterday when you read what President Trump said.
Of course, I was, similar to Fiona, very concerned about, in general, the kind of parody presidency we seem to be having, the use of Twitter. It's all concerning. I think that, in particular, Trump's assertions about trans healthcare are very counterfactual and kind of feed into some typical transphobic stereotypes that exist widely, unfortunately.
Fiona Dawson, can you talk about what exactly this would mean? Again, I put this to Patricia King. Does this mean the military will go from base to base, barracks to barracks, and take out the thousands of people who are serving in the military and toss them out?
We're going to have to deal with this moment by moment. The reality is that right now we don't know what it is going to mean. And I think when we're living in this environment of uncertainty, it's very difficult and challenging place for service members now. As you know, the numbers are more than 15,000 who are just going to keep going to work every single day. And Patricia King is an exemplary example of that. What we have to come to understand is that yesterday was a series of tweets. A tweet is not an executive order, and nor is it changing policy within the Department of Defense. This is something that was thoroughly examined and was deemed that there was no scientific reason why trans people can't serve. This is also unprecedented. Typically, a president will allow military leaders to make these types of decisions. This is inappropriate for President Trump to come and try and tell military leaders how to lead their troops. So we don't know what's going to happen right now, and I think it's telling that the Pentagon is referring back to the White House for comment. So we're just going to have to see how things evolve in the next few days.
Dean Spade, I wanted to talk to you about your comment on Facebook. You said, "The liberation we are working toward requires we fight for vets and everyone else who gets exploited and abandoned for U.S. military imperialism, but not that we participate in rhetoric that celebrates the U.S. military as an employer or ties trans well-being to military service." Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, Amy, I'm concerned that the ways in which this debate gets pitched kind of puts trans people on one side, usually framed as kind of like willing soldiers with absolutely no critique of U.S. military imperialism, or of the U.S. military as an extremely exploitative and abandoning employer, right? We know the statistics about vet suicide rates, the abandonment of vets in terms of access to real mental health care. You've widely covered the sexual assault levels in the U.S. military. There's lots of new data about the U.S. military as one of the largest polluters, or maybe the largest polluter on the planet. So when we lose our critique of militarism and of the U.S. military in this debate, what happens, in my view, is that trans people become sort of a symbolic space in which to have basically pro-military advocacy and PR. And so to me, the military inclusion campaign, both for lesbians and gays and for trans people, has often fallen into that trap, only representing the military as a great place to work that does wonderful things to protect our country, which is not, I think, a progressive view. And it rebrands the military as a site of liberation and progressive politics, which it's fundamentally not. The U.S. military, right, is one of the largest sources of violence on the planet Earth. And so my question is sort of, how can we have a more complex conversation about the fact that, yes, trans people are poor and underemployed and need real jobs, but the option should not be one of the most dangerous and exploitative jobs possible? That's not actually, I think, what a trans collective liberation is actually about. And so I'm kind of concerned about the way this conversation tends to get framed.
Fiona Dawson, your response.
I have great respect for Professor Spade, and I know that we do have some common ground. However, we have some significant differences on how we view this issue. Through my experience of coming to know many trans service members and just listening to their personal stories, I realized that the military is a very important employer and a way of them providing for their families, being able to access healthcare, be able to access housing, and be able to live the life that most Americans want to live. You know, trans people are twice as likely to be unemployed and yet twice as likely to join the military. The people that I know have not been coerced or forced to join the military, and this is a job that they want to do. And I think Patricia King was a wonderful example just now, where she has now served for 18 years. And I think that you have to come to know and understand service members and realize that this is a place where they fulfill their hopes and their dreams, and they just happen to be transgender. They join the military for the same reasons that cisgender people join the military. And the debate about imperialism and whether we should have a military should be taken outside of the debate about whether trans people should be able to serve or not. And that is the issue that we need to focus on, is the equal opportunity in this country to be able to serve in the military.
Professor Spade.
I'm just afraid that that feels politically naive to me, in the sense that, of course, you know, I care about the trans people in the military and the other trans people too, and I've also worked a lot with vets who are struggling to not get their benefits through the VA and who are homeless, and I've seen the realities of what that job is like for many people in the United States. And so one of my questions is, what does it mean when we only frame the story as the set of people who want to endorse the U.S. military right now and who are serving? I mean, what kind of sort of lost opportunity is that? And also, Amy, in your intro, you mentioned the Politico story and the ways in which we're coming to learn that perhaps this is less about Trump's invested transphobia, which of course he's happy to throw trans people away, but it's more about his desire to build his wall and his desire to get his huge defense budget passed. So I think we need to ask, how are trans issues being used politically, and is it really about trans people's well-being or not? Whenever we look at this question, we have to say, you know, how has the U.S. military had a history of recruiting very vulnerable populations who face limited economic opportunity? And Fiona may not see that as coercive, but I think I feel differently when I spent my career working with very low-income trans people struggling to have housing and employment and basic health services. And the idea that we are framing it as you should have to join the military to get basic housing, health services, and employment is really concerning to me. So I think it's vital, actually, that we look at this in a broad, big picture way, which does not mean not supporting people who are currently struggling with their jobs in the military or as vets. But I think we really are missing the ways that trans issues are being sort of used as a political symbol, rather than this coming from an actual concern about trans people's well-being.
Fiona Dawson.
I agree that you should not have to join the military to access these things, but the reality is that people are. My main mission is building LGBTQ equality in this country. And when you see a Harris poll that says that 78% of Americans think that being a military officer is a prestigious job, 64% of Americans would encourage their child to become a military officer, you realize that our trans service members are a way of relating to cisgender Americans who don't know that they might know a trans person. It's a way of people coming to understand who trans people are. And I feel that the military is a place that can unite people.
I wanted to turn to some quotes of some conservative Republican senators, like Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah. When asked about what seems to be the announcement of a change of policy, he said, "I don't think we should be discriminating against anyone. Transgender people are people and deserve the best we can do for them." Senator John McCain, of course, himself a vet of Arizona, said any American who meets current medical and readiness standards should be allowed to continue serving. There's no reason to force service members who are able to fight, train, and deploy to leave the military regardless of their gender identity. And Iowa Senator Joni Ernst's office said while she believes taxpayers shouldn't cover the costs associated with a gender reassignment surgery, Americans who are qualified and can meet the standards to serve in the military should be afforded that opportunity. What about this, Dean Spade? While you're questioning the whole issue of the military, separating the military costs of the gender reassignment surgery, whether the military should pay for this.
I mean, I think that's a really concerning framework. A lot of my broader work has been about access to trans people's healthcare needs in Medicaid, access to trans people's healthcare needs in their other, job healthcare plans. And so this is kind of a classic political move. Again, I think trans people are used often in this way politically. So a lot of people on the right will use trans people as kind of a moral issue and try to stir up fear and concern, which is often focused on our healthcare needs because there's a lot of stereotyping and misunderstanding there. So I think we see that happening. We see people on the right, in the backdrop of this story, wanting to stir up their constituents and frame themselves as morally right and distract from the fact that they're actually politicians representing the 1%, not their constituents. And on the other side, we see people on the left, which includes, I think institutions like the U.S. military, but often also politicians who want to make themselves look progressive by saying something bland about trans equality or trans people serving in the military. But when it comes down to the main issues facing trans people in the United States, like violent policing, extreme rates of incarceration, poverty, on all the policy issues that most matter to trans people's survival, they're not there. So I think it's interesting to notice how both the left and the right uses the controversial figure of trans people to their political expediency, but without actually getting into what trans people really need most and what would forward the life and well-being of the most trans people.
Kristen Beck, the 20-year veteran of the Navy SEALs, including SEAL Team 6, which killed Osama bin Laden, challenged President Trump Wednesday over the ban. She's the first transgender Navy SEAL. She told the news site Business Insider, "Let's meet face to face, and you tell me I'm not worthy. Transgender doesn't matter. Do your service," she said. Fiona Dawson.
I commend Kristen Beck for coming out and challenging Donald Trump in this way. I also would implore Donald Trump to actually meet the service members that are essentially under his leadership. Numbers more than 15,000, and I would love for him to meet Logan Island and Layla Island, who are in the short film that you showed the clip of, and many of the other service members in groups like Sparta. And of course, we have our feature documentary coming out in January that is also going to feature more trans service members who had the courage to go inside the Pentagon and share their personal stories with top brass officials over the last couple of years. So these service members have been putting themselves on the line for years and years and years. And I think it's completely disrespectful for Donald Trump just to fire off these tweets yesterday without truly knowing who these people are. And I think that he should meet trans service members.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us. Fiona Dawson, co-director and executive producer of Trans Military, speaking to us from D.C., and Dean Spade, founder of the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, professor at Seattle University School of Law, speaking to us from Seattle. This is Democracy Now! The resistance rolls on. We'll speak with 3 disability rights activists who have been protesting and lobbying around the health care bill. Stay with us.
No matter where I go, all eyes are on me. Everyone, stop what you're doing. The humans moving. Ooh, when I breathe, one of many thousands, yeah, that's who I be. Now I need the whole room to freeze. They're God blessing me, but I didn't even sneeze. On my knees, questioning excessively. Wanna know my life expectancy, like it doesn't get to me. Get a hysterectomy or life worth living. Don't watch TV, sounds like a gimmick. Little people living in a big world, successful married couple that have kids, girl. Let me guess, they eat dinner too. My breath ain't nothing but an interview. It's not what I did or what I didn't do. I learned to exploit all this shit when I was introduced to the game. Born into lame medical debt. The brain and body weren't identical yet. We made a hell of a bet, a hypothetical mess. Now I gives no fucks and it's incredible. Yes, I'm still tangled up in a mic cable and not able to eat at high tables or live life stable. I fit all your right labels, but didn't get catcalled and ain't complaining at all. They're like, Kaylin, you talk too much. Shut up, you walk too much. Or is sex still the same? I'm like, nah, boo, hush. Give me some confidence, now I got too much. The inspirational porn star. Oh, my cute wheelchair costs as much as a sports car. Look, we got enough problems, no need for you to call a cop who can't
Wheelchair
solve one.
Sports Camp here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn now to look at the rolling resistance to the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. At the forefront of the protests against the various repeal bills before the U.S. Senate are people in wheelchairs. Organized by the national nonprofit disability rights group ADAPT, Americans Disabled Attendant Programs Today, scores of disabled activists have been arrested on Capitol Hill and at senators' offices back in their home states, demanding no cuts to Medicaid. On Tuesday, as the Senate voted to open debate, 31 protesters in the Senate gallery were arrested. 64 more, many in wheelchairs, were arrested in the atrium of the Hart Senate office building. And the protests are continuing as Senate Republicans continue their attempts to repeal Obamacare. For more, we're joined by three guests who've been taking part in the protests. Stephanie Woodward is with us, an organizer with ADAPT, disability rights attorney. She was arrested Tuesday for protesting at the Hart Senate building. Video of her being ripped from her wheelchair and arrested for protesting outside Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office went viral last month. Ola Ojuwumi is a community organizer, disabled cancer survivor. She's the founder of Project Ascend, which provides opportunities to low-income and disabled students. And Kaylin Heffernan is joining us from Denver, Colorado, the front woman for the hip-hop group Wheelchair Sports Camp. She was arrested last month with ADAPT members in Denver after participating in a sit-in at Senator Cory Gardner's office. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Let's begin with Ola Ojuwumi. You have not been protesting. You've been lobbying. What are your concerns right now about what the Senate is considering? Very hard for everyone to understand, but they've already defeated two bills, one a repeal and replace, as they put it, and one an outright repeal.
I'm most fearful of the skinny repeal that they are pushing in the Senate. I have met with a variety of congressmen, Steny Hoyer, Senator Cory Booker, and Senator Van Hollen, and I've done work in lobbying and sharing my story. The skinny repeal of the Affordable Care Act would eliminate the employer mandate and would eliminate the individual mandate as well, and eliminate a medical tax, eliminate a tax on medical devices as a means of gutting the ACA. This means 16 million people will lose their health insurance, and severe cuts to Medicaid may still be on the table in the Senate. That's what I'm most fearful of, is that 14% of Medicaid recipients are people with disabilities, and we will literally die as a result of this legislation. And common humanity and caring for your fellow man does not mean eliminating access to universal health care.
Stephanie Woodward, you have been arrested now several times, is that right? Protesting this bill. Can you talk about the organizing that's going on with so many people using wheelchairs being arrested around the country, and particularly your last arrest was at the Hart office building?
Absolutely. So our last arrest, well, my last arrest, I wouldn't say ours, because people with disabilities are fighting across the nation, was on Tuesday when they were voting for a motion to proceed. And I was arrested with about 64 of my lovely ADAPT warrior siblings, as we were all chanting that we would rather go to jail than die without Medicaid, because we know that people with disabilities will quite literally die with these Medicaid cuts. So we started actually protesting back with the House bill. So myself, I've been arrested 5 times just fighting for Medicaid in the past few months. So we started with McConnell's office on the Senate bill, and since then we've had over 40 protests across the nation of people with disabilities who were already members of ADAPT or are starting their own ADAPT chapters now to fight for their lives and their liberty.
And this skinny repeal that they're talking about today, this so-called skinny repeal, your concerns about it?
Our concerns are the same concerns we've always had. At the heart of all of the repeal proposals has been gashing Medicaid, and Medicaid is what pays for the freedom of people with disabilities. It hurts me to hear Republicans talk about liberty and freedom all of the time when they want to steal the liberty and freedom of disabled people by cutting the one payer that pays for us to live in the community, that pays for us to live in the American dream that every other American lives. it doesn't sound like that's what they really care about. If you care about liberty and freedom, you should care about it for all Americans, including Americans with disabilities.
And when they say the skinny repeal doesn't touch Medicaid, Stephanie Woodward, your thoughts?
If the end result is they're trying to get to Medicaid. If this wouldn't result in cuts to Medicaid, Heller would not have put a sense of the Senate out yesterday about not cutting Medicaid. Bob Casey would not have put together a motion yesterday about not cutting Medicaid. Clearly, there are cuts coming to Medicaid, or else we wouldn't be talking about it still. And so we're not going to stop fighting until we are assured and we can actually see a bill that shows us that there will be no cuts to Medicaid.
Kaylin Heffernan, you're joining us from Denver. You're one of the founders of Wheelchair Sports Camp, the musical group. You participated in a protest in Senator Cory Gardner's office. Can you describe what happened there? Is it true that the staffers literally turned up the heat to try to get you out?
Hey, thanks for having me. We were denied access to the bathroom on the same floor for the first day that we were there. We were there for 3 days and 2 nights, about 60 hours almost. And it seemed like the first day they turned off the air, but we did have a lot of community support that was bringing us resources, able-bodied people bringing us means to go to the restroom, and also fans to keep the ventilation going.
And what are you demanding of Senator Cory Gardner?
We showed up after seeing the first bill that was proposed, and we showed up demanding that our senator vote no on anything that was going to cut Medicaid services.
Has he met with you?
For long. He did have a phone call with us a few days after we were released from jail, yes.
You know, ADAPT, your organization, was actually founded in Denver. Can you talk about the history of the group?
Yeah, Denver is a super great place for a lot of movements, also the heart of the Chicano movement. And ADAPT started when they broke some disabled people out of nursing homes in 1975 and demanded the state to pay for their services, their long-term services, and that's really what created Medicaid in the long run. ADAPT Atlantis was also the first people to lay their bodies in front of public transportation here on Colfax and Broadway, and that's why all buses now must provide access for disabled people, and some of the first people to break the corners of the sidewalks in order to get curb cuts for us wheelchair users. So Denver and this group that I sat in with is definitely a very historical, exciting group that I'm super honored to be a part of.
And you're also the founder of the hip-hop Wheelchair Sports Camp. We just played the music at the break. Can you talk about using music to push forward your politics?
Yeah, I'm just in a super awesome position to be able to tour internationally and use my voice to advocate for more disabled people. I think a lot of my lyrics have always kind of talked about my own personal advocacy and what life is like for me as a disabled person. And after playing more shows and touring more, it's become a lot more aware that the disabled community has been a big supporter of our music, and we were just happy to be able to to do this, and I'm really excited to be able to lend my voice to the Denver community as often as I can. So
Kaylin, you're one of the Denver Nine, one of the 9 people who were arrested in Senator Cory Gardner's office. Can you talk about your experience with the police? I believe one of your group, saying to the police when they're asking her how to work her wheelchair, I don't have an obligation to tell you how to work my chair and, you know, to cooperate. I will cooperate, but I will not teach you how to arrest me.
That's right. 3 of us were charged on top of trespassing with interference for not telling cops how to use our wheelchairs. Carrie Ann Lucas was escorted away by a disabled RTD bus, which is ironically there because of the same group of ADAPT activists. So yes, 3 people were also charged with interference because they were not telling cops how to use their chair.
And Ola Ojuwumi, we have spoken to you before in a previous interview. You're a double...
I apologize, the sound just went out.
You're a double organ transplant survivor. You also use a wheelchair. The response of senators to your lobbying as you talk about this being a matter of life and death?
The response from senators, especially on the Democratic side, has been wonderful. They have really become champions for people with disabilities like me. I have survived a heart and kidney transplant. Last year, I became a cancer survivor, and I'm just coming off the heels of 2 hospitalizations this month alone. They've given me a platform and other disabled advocates a platform to share our stories. And the reality is this goes beyond just the aspect of Medicaid. Not all people with disabilities are on Medicaid. Many of us do have employer-based health care like I do. And the threats to our livelihoods and the ability to have things like independent living, home-based and community services is just not affected by the Medicare aspect, but also gutting other parts of the ACA, including the individual mandate and the employer mandate. I take 22 pills a day, and my life is in the balance, and I deserve the right to live, the right to work, and the right to have access to medical health care, and not be turned away because I have a pre-existing condition.
And your response to seeing your fellow and sister wheelchair users at the front of these protests?
I am so inspired by all of them, and I'm inspired by ADAPT because they're the reason that I can get on city buses here in Washington, D.C. They literally put their lives on the line so that not just them, but the disability population at large can benefit. We are the largest minority. 19% of the American population is disabled. It's 49 million of us. So those few activists that you see willing to get arrested, willing to lie in front of buses, the history of ADAPT and the history of these powerful young women, young men, people of all generations, people with disabilities, really changing the world and not just fighting for our rights. If you see all these people with disabilities on the Hill, our work does not just affect us, it affects non-disabled people as well, because health insurance isn't just for the chronically ill. It's not just for people with disabilities, it's for all of us. So they're laying down their lives on the line, not just for disabled people, but for the able-bodied as well.
Finally, you are also a big Planned Parenthood activist. The possibility of Planned Parenthood being cut, and Ola, we only have 10 seconds.
Planned Parenthood is directly correlated with Medicaid, and women of color who receive services from Planned Parenthood will be affected. We need to keep the ACA alive and the Medicaid expansion so women and women of color particularly can still get access to Planned Parenthood services, cancer screenings, and mammograms.
We're going to have to leave it there. On Ola's Facebook page, it says, no one should have to fight this hard for what should be treated as a human right. Ola Ojuwumi, Kaylin Heffernan, Stephanie Woodward, thanks so much for joining us. Our website is democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.